Positioned amidst the footpath lay a little bundle of red-brown fur. A gentleman gazed around in astonishment. It was a vibrant pedestrian street in the city's sightseeing hotspot. Bystanders, astonished, were studying the architectural grandeur and capturing every lamplight on their cameras. All seemed ordinary, except there was something diminutive, fluffy, evidently awake, and right in the core of the pathway. Unlike humans, dogs didn't turn a blind eye to the sight. One such canine was fervently drawing its owner closer to the intriguing discovery. As it salivated excessively, it was obvious that its curiosity had a clear culinary intent. The gentleman hurried over. Regardless of being a small rat or a kitten, it didn't merit being devoured at the outset of its life by an enormous slobbering dog that its owners hadn't trained to abstain from picking up things from the floor. The owners didn't heed their dog's actions. They pulled the leash impatiently, but they slackened it a bit further each time. The dog was just marginally distant from the quivering, tiny being. However, the attentive bystander was faster. The gentleman swiftly stood between the canine and the petite animal, obstructing the way and breaking the visual linkage. The dog expressed its displeasure with a growl. The owners eventually responded to their pet but were confused by the scenario and presumed the dog was growling at a stranger. The leash was taut once again, drawing the animal away. The dog took a forlorn look back but faithfully trailed behind its owners. The reluctant protector neared the tiny being, knelt, and extended a hand. The creature recoiled at the touch. It coiled up, rendering its identification more difficult. The gentleman delicately hoisted the light body onto his palm. Upon closer examination, it was found to be a baby squirrel. It was mystifying how it ended up in the city's heart. The nearest green space, where squirrels were known to frolic, was quite a distance from the historical city center. Nonetheless, the gentleman held the unfortunate little being in his hand, and something had to be done. Not pondering much, he made his way to the nearest animal clinic. Merely on discovering the baby, the medical staff gathered around, chiding the intervening gentleman. Why did you move the newborn squirrel from its location? Its mother would have returned for it. If not right away, then perhaps in a half hour or a full hour. Now its survival could become arduous. You're showing a lack of responsibility towards nature. Take the baby back now. You shouldn't do this, the assertive voice echoed. The dog, was the rescuer's attempted objection. Your role is to shield the baby from dogs, cats, and crows. Stand by and anticipate the mom squirrel's arrival. Keep any predators away. Who's the next one? A burly woman with a wailing cat in her arms instantly shoved a man out of the way. The team at the clinic became unfocused with the original visitor, gathering around the cat instead. Now quite annoyed, the dismissed man had no choice but to seek another clinic. At the new clinic, the man began by narrating the circumstances and location where he discovered the baby animal. The vet gently picked up the baby creature, tugged its skin subtly, and scrutinized it. The medical professional released the man, thankful that he rescued the little one, and began taking care of the pint-sized being. The baby creature's fur seemed to clump under the touch and did not return to its smooth texture. The only logical conclusion: acute dehydration. Rehydration via syringe was the immediate step taken by the vet. The baby animal's body temperature was observed to be below the normal limits. It was dangerously close to being fatally chilled. The tiny creature was just starting to open its eyes, which inferred it was around 10 days old. But its weight was alarmingly lesser than the usual. Furthermore, sparse fur was riddled with fleas. These pests were taking shelter in the thin skin and thriving at its expense. Dealing with these parasites was the vet's top priority to prevent further harm to the baby. The newborn was meticulously cleaned, dried, and wrapped in heated towels to maintain temperature. Elements of glucose were administered to keep its vitality intact. The crucial initial 24 hours would decide its fate. Either it would struggle and thrive or just be a memory. For reviving the drained baby, feeding every 3 hours was a necessity. The absence of goat milk formula and cow's milk would mean a stoppage of its digestive system. Nothing would help in such a situation. Procuring goat's milk presented challenges. Hence, a nutritional blend used for feeding kittens was an adequate substitute. The baby had its first 2 meals at the clinic. It appeared to still be traumatized, shivering, despite the increase in body temperature. Its minute claws were clawing onto the fabric tightly. The minute creature instinctively understood it was not in its familiar surroundings with its mother, and it was noticeably anxious. At every sound, it wiggled and cringed when picked up, but quietly consumed all that the syringe had to give. Then the veterinary doctor's shift concluded. The vet's clinic was small, private, and only functioned during daytime hours. Leaving the baby animal all by itself throughout the night was out of the question, so the doctor took the little one home. At the man's house were 2 cats, a parrot, and a canine already residing. These pets didn't warmly welcome this fresh arrival. For the safety of the tiny creature, all had to be gently led out of the bedroom. The baby animal, swaddled in a towel, found a spot in a little box. The vet spent the entire evening in search of a permanent home for the baby, where it would receive proper care. Leaving him in the apartment could potentially lead to harm. The older pets united against the newbie, patiently waiting for a chance to approach it. Consistently moving him between the clinic and the house was also not feasible. Visitors could bring in various diseases, and the trips were intimidating and exhausting for the tiny squirrel. The nearby zoo declined to accept the baby as he wasn't foreign nor particularly interesting. The vet firmly refused to hand the baby over to a petting zoo. He couldn't doom a living creature to continual suffering, stress, and harassment from visitors of such places. After a lengthy online search, the vet found a few enthusiasts on social media. A couple had spare enclosures in their residence where they nurtured wild animals. They were caring for fox kits, hawks, hedgehogs, and squirrels. All these animals had come to the volunteers injured. These individuals treated and cared for them, and subsequently released them back into the wilderness. Their profile was bursting with heartening stories of surprise rescues and releases. They had saved a baby crow, nursed a swan with a damaged wing, and aided a fox with an injured paw. But then there were also the tearjerkers. They lost a young deer following a vehicular accident. They couldn't save a stork with a broken beak. The vet had seen tragedy in his practice and knew that, heartbreakingly, that not all animal lives can be saved, no matter the effort. Therefore, the man made up his mind to entrust the baby squirrel to the volunteers. The couple, Misha and Anya, arrived the next day, reassuring him they knew squirrel care techniques. They went home with a substantial supply of kitten formula. On the first day, the baby was quarantined in a separate box. Anya adhered to an hourly feeding schedule for the little one, named Croca, added the prescribed glucose, and monitored its temperature. In just a day, the baby squirrel adjusted to its new surroundings. No longer did it tremble or flinch at the sound of human voices, and instead it began to curiously observe its surroundings from within its temporary home. The couple decided it was time to introduce the newcomer to the shared living space. In another room, they had a large enclosure complete with comfy wooden nooks, branches, ropes, and fabric nests suspended from the ceiling. 2 other baby squirrels that had been rescued from the streets already called this place home. Each had a unique background, but they shared the same outcome. One of the squirrels had been discovered during a mushroom foraging excursion, fallen from its nest and resting underneath a tree. Its finders thought it would be fun to have a squirrel as a pet. They'd seen videos on TikTok and YouTube of the friendly and energetic creatures perched happily on people's shoulders. The concept was so enticing that they snatched up the tiny squirrel without a second thought. After bringing it home, they quickly discovered the squirrel didn't care for the food they provided. For whatever reason, it showed no interest in nuts or mushrooms, despite the depictions in children's books. Without proper nutrition or parental care, the baby squirrel's health swiftly began to decline. What had started as an energetic exploration of their home quickly transformed into immobility and a decreasing response to its environment by the next day. The adults feared the children would be disturbed by the squirrel's passing, so they decided to place it under the nearest tree. Luckily, it was speedily found by empathetic pedestrians who promptly handed it over to Misha and Anya. A second baby squirrel was found on the ground in a park, its deceased mother nearby. It was suspected the mother squirrel had consumed poison seeds left by rats near a cafe. The young squirrel was left by itself, survival unlikely. Misha and Anya took it upon themselves to nurse this little squirrel back to health along with the other. An adult squirrel, an injury on its hind leg healed, also took residence in the enclosure. Though it preferred its solitude, eating separately and interacting minimally with the youngsters. Soon it would be reintroduced to its natural habitat. The enclosure's inhabitants welcomed the newest addition with warmth. The adult squirrel dismissed its presence, while the two other youngsters inspected their new playmate with curiosity and intrigue. Over the following weeks, the couple's normal restful nights became a distant memory. They nurtured the little ones day in, day out, alternating the tasks of mixing the feed and dispensing it via a feeding tube. As they diligently cared for them, the small squirrels grew steadily healthier and larger. Before they knew it, the time came for the furry creatures to be independent, left to explore an enclosure on their own. The adult gray squirrel took the cue and joyfully darted off into the adjacent woodland. The sprouting youngsters proved quite spirited. Their entire day spent scampering around on arranged branches and ropes, scrutinizing pine cones brought by their caregivers, then sleepily draping themselves over on their tummies. The innocent creatures tumbled onto their backs in fun, with paws reaching out, and then chittering in protest when a cage mate decided to nibble at them. Over time, their dependence on the formulated feed lessened. Initially, husbanded snacks such as crackers, grains of wheat, dried corn, and seeds were presented to them. After a week of this, fresh fruits and nuts were introduced. The eager infants sampled every new food, squabbling over particularly appealing morsels and chittering in pleasure as they enjoyed juicy fruits. As they matured and their diet became more refined, their meals were no longer simply served, but hidden to promote natural foraging behaviors. To satiate their appetites, the squirrels had to hunt for their meals. Once they were adept at tasks such as uncovering ears of corn, shelling nuts from cones, and dissecting fruits to reach the seeds buried within mounds of dried leaves, it was time for the next phase. Humans decided it was time to reintroduce them to their natural habitat. Upon a warm, bright day, the adolescent squirrels were carefully placed in a small transport cage and journeyed toward a lush, forested area. A wide-branched tree marked the drop-off point. When the cage door was swung open, the furry adventurers peered out curiously but refrained from bolting. A makeshift trail of acorns and sunflower seeds tempted the little explorers, eventually coaxing them out of their confinement. The sudden expanse of freedom was both intimidating and exhilarating for the youngsters, who then had to adjust to the myriad of new smells surrounding them. Despite their hesitation, one by one they mustered up the courage to scale their assigned arboreal rescue, disappearing into the verdant canopy. Their past may hold sorrowful tales, but these spirited creatures made it through, all thanks to patient, caring individuals. Their journey from vulnerable newborns to independent adolescents serves as a beautiful testament to the resilience of wildlife.